Ready? طيب بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدي رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. So there's 3 more sessions today, and then this Sunday at 5, and then next Wednesday, and then we're done. That will conclude all 10 sessions for the first. For the Hadith course, the first level Hadith course, first part. Second part, Sheikh Ziyad gave. It's online, it's in Arabic, and it's in English, so you can choose whatever language you want. He may run it again, so you can attend it in person. I probably won't run this course again for a couple of semesters before I come back to it. So if you end up not writing the exam or wanting to write it later on, you'd have to go and attend the online version in a future semester. So we're at Hadith 15 and 16, and then we'll do 17, 18 on Sunday, and then we'll do 19, 20, and 21, inshallah, on next Wednesday. Now I'll conclude this course. I put in the one assignment, which is the narration of the hadith. It's very simple. People ask me a lot of questions. It's actually very simple. I just want يروي الإمام الفلاني في الكتاب الفلاني بسند whatever عن الصحابي قال النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. Just do it and just send it in a voice. We'll provide the method of sending it in a voice or video recording. And I'll just listen to it and I'll offer you some feedback in terms of what to do. So you learn, inshallah, to narrate a hadith appropriately, and you have like a baseline of doing that, inshallah. There will be another, I'll put in another assignment, inshallah, next time. All these assignments are due at the end of April, basically. And the exam will be at the end of April as well. So we have a lot of time, inshallah, for this course, due obviously to the holy month of Ramadan. So hadith number 15. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قال: من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم جاره. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم ضيفه. رواه البخاري ومسلم. So this is a very, again, all of the 42 Nawawi hadith are very, very famous, and this is one that I think most people know pretty well. And if they don't know it as a hadith, they at least understand it as an Islamic concept because it's well established within our law, within our etiquettes. Where he says, alayhi salatu wasalam, man kana yu'min. Now, before we go into the actual meat of what he was talking about, is why did he repeat this? He kept on saying, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawm al-akhir. He used that phrase, he repeated it 3 times. Those who believe in Allah and the hereafter, if they believe, then may they do this. This is how the sentence would translate into English. Because man is a harf shart. It's a condition. It's a proposition that is used for establishing a condition. So when he says man kana, it's not he who, or see. So the way that is, let him who believes in Allah in the last day speak good or keep silent. Okay, acceptable, but really there's an implied condition or conditional speech within this within this sentence. So it's as if he's saying, if you believe in Allah and the hereafter, then you will perform the next piece of the sentence. Yukram dayfa, you will be kind to your neighbor or to your guest. So. The reason that he would repeat sallallahu alaihi wasallam, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir, is to say, what he's trying to say alayhi salatu wasalam, is that there are conditions to believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the hereafter to be correct or valid, or for it to be acceptable. This is again explaining a similar concept that we've talked about in the past a number of times. That there's a difference between making the claim and the claim being accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not the same thing. So for example, when you say fil Fatiha, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, it's you and only you whom we serve, and it's you and only you whom we seek aid from. In the hadith of Imam Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replies to you every time, and he says, هَذَا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِي. This is between you, me and my servant. This is between us. Meaning, that has yet to be improved. It has not been proved yet. You have to prove it. You can say it as much as you want. You can claim it all day long. If you don't prove it with your actions, then it's not meaningful. And that's what Iman is. See, all of these ahadith, what the hadith is doing is that it's explaining to us what Iman means. Because the word Iman in Old Arabic just means actually just belief. In Islam, it has a different, it's a part of the nomenclature of our deen. Islam coins a few phrases or words, meaning they took those words and it gave an istilah, a meaning that exists within the deen. For example, the word salah. For example, the word taqwa. For example, the word tawakkul. These words, for example, the word siyam. These words had meanings in Arabic before. It's not like the word did not exist in the Arabic language. No, it existed in the Arabic language. And it had an understanding, had a meaning. But then Islam came and explained that this is what it means. Salah does not mean prayer as in supplication or invocation or a chant that you make to a Lord. No, salah is one of the five prayers that we pray, or a prayer that is similar to them as a sunnah. That's what the word salah means. You can still use it for its initial, you can still use it regarding its initial understanding, initial meaning, but it will always be, that will be its first meaning. If you studied my usul fiqh, there's haqiqa and majaz in words. There are words that have literal meanings and figurative meanings. So the literal meaning, sometimes a word is shifted due to a nomenclature or terminology that has now become much more powerful, and that becomes its literal meaning. It's no longer the figurative meaning. Salah as a word means prayer, as in any form of chanting, and that's its literal meaning. Its figurative meaning is the five things we do. But because Islam was so powerful for so long, and the terminology became the most used, the word salah as the five prayers that we do, it became the haqiqah. It became the literal meaning of the word. And as dua became the figurative one. And that goes for a lot. Siyam means to abstinence, just to hold back from something. And that's the literal meaning. The figurative meaning is not to eat from Fajr until Maghrib, but that changed because of the fact that this word became central within Islamic faith, and Islam was the force behind the Arabic language actually growing and developing and being preserved. So now the literal meaning of Siyam is what we do in Ramadan, and then the figurative meaning is the other stuff. So that happens in languages all the time. It's not just Arabic, every language has that in it. It's normal. Iman is one of those words. So the old meaning is just to believe in something. You don't have physical proof. You don't have physical, like you can't, you're not carrying something in your hand, you're not seeing something in your eyes, you're not smelling something with your nose or hearing something with your ears. You don't have physical, you don't have tangible, you don't have a test, a lab test. You just don't have something that you can use as physical proof. Iman is that in terms of its initial meaning in Arabic. Jazakallah khair. Islam, of course, coined this phrase, so the word iman does not mean that anymore. It means to internalize a theology, to internalize it. Now that initial meaning still exists in iman. It's still there. I mean, when you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't have physical proof, as in you can say this is the equation that equals God at the end of it, or here's the telescope that if you stand behind you will see the arsh of Allah. We don't have that, and we never will. And whatever it is that you end up seeing through the telescope or proving via equation to be God is by definition no longer God anymore. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is beyond the tangible universe and He's beyond time and space. So the design of being divine means that you cannot be reached via physical proof. That's what it means in its nature. So there's no point in looking in science for physical proof to God. It's an oxymoron if one ever existed. It's impossible to do so. You're not supposed to do it because it take you nowhere. The physical universe, or the observable universe, does not have within it that. It's the signs that you have within the universe that will point towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala easily. Philosophically, it's not very difficult at all. But physical evidence, aside from the large picture, that it's one law that governs all of these physical, all of the physical universe, that's the proof. Is that oneness, is that continuity. These are the things. But the actual, you're looking for the universe to show you, you're looking for evidence. Whatever the universe is going to show you in terms of evidence or proof is going to be something that's contained within the universe. It's going to be within time and space. And if it's within time and space, then it's not God anymore, because then time and space is God if He's actually contained in there. Because why worship the one that's containing the God Himself? So God shouldn't. The concept of God cannot be contained. If He can be contained by anything, then He's not God anymore. And whatever contained Him, that's God. Anyway, it's not. But I'm just trying to explain to you how this is supposed to be looked at. So when he says iman within it, there's the concept of believing in something without physical proof, that's fine. But really what it means in Islam is to internalize a theology. And I know the word internalize only started maybe the last 30 years ago within self-help books. But no, it's always been there philosophically and from in Sufism and early Sufi teachings, even predating Islamic law altogether, predating Islam. This was talked about, meaning if you have an idea, that idea does not turn into practice until it transfers from the different levels of consciousness. This is how it's talked about, and psychologists and but even Freud talked about this, by the way. As little as he cared for the human, the human psyche and the ability of the human psyche to actually internalize things, and he looked at everything being reflect instincts, he still saw the ability for you to have an idea that you believed in so powerfully that it actually turned into a concept or principle that you now were going to make your decisions based upon. It's going to drive your behaviors, which is not an easy thing. But that is what Iman is. Iman is basically your understanding of certain concepts so deeply that now they are going to govern your behaviors and your decisions. Your behaviors are going to be based on these concepts. We all have what I call a cellar. It's way down inside of your qalb. It's covered by a lot of clutter, and it's kept nice and hidden by your nafs because it doesn't want you to know what's inside. Within that cellar is all the values that determine who you are and how you behave. Right? Most people go through their lives and never actually rip the cover off that cellar and go down in there and see what exactly they're living by. Because most people would like to believe that, no, I live by this and I live by that. Nice, bubbly little concepts that they think are cute, and they keep in the superficial part of their consciousness and they talk about. But those aren't really what you believe in. What you believe in is something much more, exists much deeply, much more deeply inside of you. How do you know what they are? Just look at your day, look at your life, look at your week, and see how you behave regarding certain examples or scenarios. And whatever you do, that is what you believe in. A man, for example, who walks around not lowering his gaze, he can say, no, I believe that lowering your gaze is correct. Yeah, you believe it as an ideal that you have somewhere in your superficial consciousness you think is cute, you think it's nice. That's what you want people to think you believe. That's what you would like to believe. That's what you would like to be one day. But that's not really what you believe. What you believe is something way deeper inside that you have not had the courage yet to actually rip the cover off the cellar and look deep inside and see what it is. And when you do, what you'll find is that you don't really believe that it's haram. You're like, well, it's not that bad. At least I'm not doing this. Other people are doing that. I'm in such a difficult situation that probably Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't really care about me doing this. And I'm just doing it as a way just to keep myself away from actual haram by just taking this as it's like a bargain. That's what you really believe. That and it's being haram are not the same thing. They're very different. This transition is huge. It takes actually a lot of things have to change in order for you to actually believe that staring at something haram is problematic and shouldn't happen. It's very difficult. It's not even remotely similar. And there's so many other examples. We talk about rahmah, for example. If there is an exception to rahmah within your heart, then you can say, no, I believe in it all across the board, but do you really? Or is there some group that but not that group. I know they don't believe it. Allah has no problem with me not believing it. Like it's where you make your exceptions. It's where you kind of make your rationalizations to actually stuff. And you cover that up because you don't want to look at it. But that's where things actually believe. Actually, what dictates your behavior, that's where it actually exists. You have to be able to have enough insight and self-awareness and willingness to face yourself, to go down and see, what do I actually believe? Do I believe in Silat al-Rahim? Yes. But not to Fulan or Ulan, or not if they do this or that. Who allowed you to make all of these exceptions? Like, did God himself send you a note that, you can, by the way, exempt Fulan and Ulan from this or not? So these exemptions that we offer ourselves unlawfully with no evidence and no actual reason why we're allowed to do it is what dictates our behavior. Which is why someone who believes in Nizam will believe in it except in certain situations, where they are maybe for example, mal halal, I only eat mal halal. What's the point of that belief if when you get hungry enough or tired enough or you're scared enough for your finances or you're in a difficulty, you'll take haram? but not outside of that. That's not really this belief. Believing in the fact that only mal halal is not equal to, yes, except if I'm in position number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. If that's what actually exists, then that's what exists, and that's what you're going to be judged by. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is seeing. Because He doesn't need, He sees right through the filter, so He sees exactly what you actually believe. But we walk around claiming to believe things. Learn in your life to differentiate between what you want, what you tell people you believe, what you tell yourself you believe, what you actually believe. If you can do that, then you don't need almost any of these sessions or courses or the mashayikh or anyone else. You'll be fine. Yes?
I think that they're using this concept that there's something in the cellar.
Yeah.
And that's where
Yeah.
actual belief is. Is there a name?
That's where the qalb is. Yeah. It's the fu'ad, or it's the qalb. So the subconsciousness or the consciousness.
Have a name for it, or is just the qalb or the conscious? I mean, is there a field of study?
Yeah, within tazkiyah, yeah, for sure. Well, they talk about this all the time. So ما يدعيه المرء اعتقادا وما يعتقده المرء أمران مختلفان. So this is actually the words of Imam Ghazali. What you claim to believe and what you actually believe are two different things. Which is why the concept of iman exists within our deen the way that it does, or the way it's talked about the way it does. Don't say amanna, say aslamna, because you have not achieved that level yet. The reason that we have that in the Quran and in the Prophet ﷺ's wording, man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir. What does this have to do? What does believing in Allah and the hereafter have to do with saying something nice or holding your tongue? Right? Unless it makes sense if you understand what I'm trying to explain to you. Because when you internalize that belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it actually becomes, with it comes the concepts, with it comes the principles and the values, and the principles and values now have a space there, they're internalized, so they will relate or result into certain behaviors. But if you don't, if the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is superficial, then all of the values and principles that are attached to that will stay in the superficial part of your brain. You'll use them every once in a while. You'll use them when things are going absolutely amazing. When you are mirtah, you're in the masjid, you have a lot of wealth, you have a lot of health, you have a lot of support, you feel that you're doing well, you can take the superficial stuff and throw it and use it. It's right. But it's what the internal beliefs actually do. They come out when you're going through difficulty. That's why people at moments of difficulty will show their true colors. They will either show sabr or show something different. They will, if you twist their arm, they'll say what they actually feel and believe in, because that's whatever is underlying the superficial stuff. Most of us are able to use that superficial stuff because we're living lives that are technically, or to a certain degree, alhamdulillah, we're quite pampered and taken care of. But once you go into real difficulty, that's where the seller beliefs kick in, and then that kind of ruins things, and people don't know anymore. Yeah.
What if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't test us on certain things, and then
He's not going to test you on what's in the cellar. He's going to test you on what it leads to in terms of behaviors, right? So he'll leave that. He won't talk to you about it. He sees it. He won't talk to you about it. But there's no question that those beliefs, those internalized understandings or comprehensions or concepts, are going to lead to behaviors later. And he'll hold you to the behaviors. And you are guaranteed in life to be put in situations where they will kick in multiple times. It's impossible. No one has lived a life where they didn't kick in. Every single one of us. The question is, do you know what they are? So you change them before they kick in at some point, and then it's hard to go back, or they kick in, or they don't, and they kick in the last moment of your life. Look, and you have no time to perform tawbah because you never actually cared about them to begin with. The reason that I'm telling you this is because this is what he's trying to explain, alayhi salatu. Those who believe, if you believe in Allah and the hereafter, then you will say khair, or you'll hold your tongue. You'll say something that's helpful, that is beneficial, or you'll hold your tongue. And to the Sahaba and to the scholars, the connection is very clear. It's not difficult to say what's the connection between Iman, Billah, I believe in Allah and the hereafter, but I'm always saying harmful things. Yeah, well, not really the way you should. Like your belief system is not where you think where it needs to be, is very far from that. Because if you actually internalize the theology of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is and what He's teaching, then all the values and principles that He made clear subhanahu wa ta'ala in His book will enter into that cellar and be a part of who you are. But that takes a while. It doesn't happen initially. You can do, you're aslamna, it's just sitting there in the consciousness on the surface of it, and you're using it whenever it's convenient to do so. But actually, that's why فَلَقْتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ, right? In Surah فَلَقْتَحَمَ الْعَقَبَةِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْعَقَبَةِ فَكُّ رَقَبَةٍ أَوْ إِطْعَامٌ فِي يَوْمٍ ذِي مَسْغَبَةٍ يَتِيمًا ذَا مَقْرَبَةٍ أَوْ مِسْكِينًا ذَا مَتْرَبَةٍ. Why don't you overcome the obstacle? What is the obstacle? It is freeing a slave or feeding someone on a day where you are more hungry than they are. I mean, when it's difficult to feed, like when it's easy to feed, everyone can feed. But can you feed when you are starving? Can you free a slave when you yourself is enslaved? The Prophet ﷺ at that point was denied the ability to enter his own home. He wasn't even a refugee. He was homeless. He had nowhere to go. Look for people that are enslaved that you can free. Look for people who are hungry to feed. But I myself can't. I myself don't have my freedom, nor do I have enough food. That doesn't matter. Why are you? What does this have to do with that? This is a value. It's always there. It's not conditional. It's not conditional. This is what this is trying to explain. I feel like this hadith is beautiful, but if you don't understand it that way, you don't end up benefiting from it. Like, فَلْيُكْرِمْ جَارَهُ فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ. Then prove the fact that your iman is now internalized by only saying something beneficial or holding your tongue. It's very hard because you'll be just boiling to say something back to someone who's just full of it. Just full of it. Just running their mouths about complete nonsense. Just say, and you're just boiling to say something, not to achieve anything good, but just to get it off your chest so you can sleep at night. فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمِتْ. Now, we can take that example and break it down for a good hour of why is it that I feel like I have to respond to someone who is saying something wrong? Why do I have to feel it? It'll take a while. But the concept is if iman is internalized, then all these things change, so you're able. This is the concept, this is the result. This is the symptom of iman. That's what happens. You have true iman, then you'll always be careful. And you'll have no trouble or difficulty only saying something helpful and holding your tongue when it's not. It won't be that difficult for you because iman now is clear to you. I have difficulty with it. Very good. Then what you do is actually go back and say, okay, what is you go back and look at that earlier piece. You want to fix the problem? Go to the root. Go to the root. Here's the root. The root is this. يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. You internalize that belief in Allah and the hereafter. It will result in things. There's a little bit of programmers. There's a long number of lines in program that will happen between iman and the actual يَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمِتْ. Lines of programming will go on until you get there. Now, talking about that will take some time, but understanding it, if you at least start to understand that these are very much connected. Because this hadith is such a, I'm sorry to say this, this hadith and hadith like them have been turned into such token hadith. They've been turned into that. They become just something you say. Just say it. Because the Prophet ﷺ said it, so we can just be like, wow, he said that. That's what our deen is about. Sure. Yeah. So, no one does it. What's the point? What are we so happy about? Yeah, he said it, alayhi salatu wasalam. No one does this. Rarely do people know how to hold their tongues when they know what they're going to come out of their mouths is not khayr, it's not helpful, it's not good. It's going to be harmful, it's going to offend someone, it's going to hurt someone. It's not going to actually do anything aside from fulfill this need, this selfish satisfaction or selfish need of expression or self-expression. فَلْيُكْرِمْ جَارَهُ فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ. May they take care of their neighbors. It's easy to take care of a neighbor you like. It's the neighbor that you don't like that this hadith is talking about. Neighbors you like, that doesn't take any iman. That takes nothing. It's the ones that you don't like, that you don't think are amazing, the people who are very annoying to you. Tukrimhum. If you truly believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tukrimhum, you'll treat them with high dignity. ضَيْفَهُ. The same thing, your guests, whether people enter your home, or enter your office, or enter your masjid, or whatever they are. The ones that are very well behaved, there's nothing there. He explained these things. ليس الواصل بالمكافئ. Another hadith, in hadith Imam Ahmad. صلة الرحم, you would say, ليس الواصل بالمكافئ. The wasil al-rahim is not the one who responds to someone who visited him. وإنما الذي إذا قطعته رحمه وصلها. It's the person exclusively who, when his relatives, they ruin the relationship, he goes and he fixes it again. Time and time again. That's the wasil rahim. It's easy when someone is visiting you every week for you to go and visit them back. There's nothing heroic about that. There's nothing impressive. It's still important. I'm not saying it's not a part of the deen. Don't misunderstand me what I'm trying to explain to you. But that's not really what he's trying to explain here, alayhi salatu wasalam. When he's using this terminology and repeating, man kana yu'min, he's like to say this one belief, now this one you internalize this one thing, it results in all of these symptoms, all of these behaviors will result from it. Ikram al-dayf and ikram al-jar and qawl al-khair. Now this one thing that if you internalize appropriately, iman billah wal yawm al-akhir, it'll turn into all this stuff. And that's why he repeated it, alayhi salatu wasalam. That's why I think this is very important. So why did the Prophet ﷺ use repetitive language? That's why. What is the significance of using conditions in this hadith? Conditions, huh? He is making it a condition. If you believe, then this. So if this is not happening, then that's how a condition works. If it's not happening, then we have a problem. And the condition is not fulfilled. Conditions are scary. When they're in the Quran and when they're hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, they're very heavy because they connect things. They affiliate and associate behaviors with other behaviors or behaviors with beliefs or statuses with behaviors. And it corners us. And it corners us because if I can't do this, that means there's something wrong because there's a condition there. So I have to go back and I have to question myself and ask whether I'm doing this, whether I actually have the proper understanding of all of this. And that's why you're always questioning yourself in terms of what type of iman you have and what is your iman really and what is it based on and what is it, because you have to look at the results. Why does the Prophet affiliate iman with how we treat others? So that's maybe another level of looking at how is iman billah subhanahu wa ta'ala bil yawm al akhir, internalizing of these concepts, internalizing of the theology of the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment. How does that result into how we treat others? That's the connection I'm talking about. There's a continuum, there's a thought process that's involved in accepting. When you accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you internalize His belief, it's clear to you that La ilaha illahu and yawm as-sa'atu atiyatun la rayba fiha, and you're going to be held accountable on the day of judgment. That leads to a logical thought process, one thing after the other. Well, if that's the case, then if I'm going to accept that, then I have to accept everything that he teaches. So I have to look at what he teaches. And then when I find what he teaches certain concepts, and those concepts have to be, and he just goes, based on my job description, I'm a khalifa, I'm a abd, and it keeps on going from one thing to the other, and then it'll result into, well, if I truly am a servant, and I'm truly a caregiver and a steward, and I'm someone who's responsible, well, that means I can't behave like this, and I have to always behave like that, and I can't be this, and I have to be that, and then you end up with this long list of do's and don'ts that are based on your understanding of why it is that of your belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's connected. It just takes a few thought process steps. There's a few steps that you have to put together, but it's very much affiliated and associated with how we treat people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make our relationship with Him exclusive in terms of His consequences. Actually, the relationship that we have with Him subhanahu wa ta'ala results in how we're going to be dealing with people, or with living things, or with the world that we are a part of. Because our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is actually quite limited, as we cannot harm Him or benefit Him. It's more how we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how we attempt to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are the two things, and they don't take a lot of time. They may feel, but they're not the majority of your life. The majority of your life is you dealing with the world around you. And it results. Again, there are a lot of attempts to say that they have nothing to do with each other now. You accept Islam and that's just in your home or in your masjid and outside. No, that's not. Maybe that's some other faith, but that's not what Islam is. Islam doesn't work that way. Islam actually has to result in how the consequences of its belief has to be seen in how people behave outside of masajid and outside of their mihrab when they're praying to Allah or making dua or reading the Quran, which has its time and has its setup, which Ramadan is a good example of where that's hyper-focused. But outside of that, it's something very, very different. What is the hadith mutawatir? Again, the pieces of mustalah al-hadith that we'll cover inshallah within this. I hope this the piece of hadith sciences is helpful for you. And I'm giving you a good basis for attending inshallah a hadith mustalah course that inshallah Sheikh Ziyad or myself, depending on which one of us want to do it, once we run it, because it's an important science to understand. So I'm offering some basic definitions. So mutawatir, and I put a nice long definition for you. So I'll give you the gist of it. Mutawatir, meaning the concept of tawatur is succession, like something that keeps on following the same pattern. And the hadith that is mutawatir, or any piece of evidence, let's say not just hadith, but here the definition is for hadith specifically, but any piece of evidence that is mutawatir, it could be applied to any piece of evidence that is historic in context or in nature, is based on the idea that you have more than 3 or 5 people per chain of narration, per chain, per level of narration, forgive me, per level. So remember when I showed you the, maybe I haven't showed it to you yet, have I? Probably not, that's fine. It'll I think come next lesson. But when you're looking at the chain of narration from the guy who wrote the book, Imam Abu Dawud, for example, in his Sunan, and then you have Uway ibn Ka'b, who's narrating the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. Between them are people, right? So when it's just one person per level, it's a hadith ahad, which we talked about. A hadith mutawatir is when you have more than 3 per level. Some scholars say more than 5. It's not agreed upon within scholarly groups. It's not agreed upon what the number actually is. They define it by saying يستحيل تواطؤهم على الكذب أو يحيل تواطؤهم على الكذب, meaning enough people per level where it's impossible for this to be forged, for this historical record to be made up. Now the Quran is that way. The Quran is 1,000 people per level, because the Prophet, aside from the Prophet, there's not 1,000 prophets, it's him, and then the Sahaba, and then the Tabi'een, and then Tabi'een. It just gets, actually the number, it gets bigger, right? A hadith, we don't have a lot of those. They're actually very few. We have a couple of books, Maqasid al-Sakhiyya, Maqasid al-Hasana. We have a few books that are written, Imam Sakhawi wrote one, and others have written, where they put together what they thought were hadith mutawatira. And of course, these books have been critiqued heavily. Altogether, maybe 30 hadith that are mutawatir altogether. The rest of them are all ahad. Because it's hard to get a hadith where within each level there are 3 people. And those 3 people can't just be 3 random Joes. They have to actually be ai that are of the first 3 or 4 levels of narrators. I mean, they have to be udul, sadiq. They have to have the vouching of the other scholars of their. If you remember, I talked to you last week that the person has to be. Let's see if he's still there. So remember, I pointed out that the trustworthy of the narrator has to be Muslim, has to be of a certain age, has to be not an open sinner, has to be wise, has to be educated. Like there has to be there's certain criteria for someone to be a trustworthy narrator. So when we say mutawatir, there's 3 people per level. They have to all be obviously trustworthy narrators. If you have like all 3 of them are liars, the hadith becomes weaker than that becomes a mawdu' and makdhub and munkar, and it becomes a problem. If you have you have more than 3 people, but all of them are known liars per level of narration, that hadith is for sure is not said by the Prophet ﷺ. But so you can imagine it's not easy. The Quran was easier to get that. Why? Because the Quran was written. The Quran was documented, so it's much easier. When you document, when you write, it makes it easier. It was by design. The Prophet ﷺ told them to write the Quran and not to write his hadith, so that they wouldn't be merged or fused together. And then you would end up with not knowing which is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is divine in nature, versus his attempt alayhi salatu wasalam to explain, to practice. They're a little bit different. So that's what the mutawatir is in terms of what it looks like. It's something where it can't be forged because too many people within that level. It's very hard to find. If you have a hadith that has like 3 sahaba, or 4, let's say 4, and then 4 tabi'een, and then 4 tabi'een, and then after that just 1 scholar, and then 4 and 4 and 4 and 4. That's not mutawatir. That 1 scholar there. But he's a scholar, I know. But he's still just 1 human. Unless he's not human or something different. It's 1. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. This is something that the scholars of this ilm were very clear in explaining, and they understood, which is why it has to be per every level of narration. Sometimes the people who define mutawatir will omit the level of the Sahaba. Sometimes. I don't agree even with that. I think it has to be even the level of Sahaba, has to be called mutawatir. If you're going to give it that grade A evidence, then you have to, even then, more than one person has to have to heard it. Because they're human. We're not accusing one of them of saying something false. Hasha lillah. But they're human. They could have easily misheard. They could have easily misunderstood or misremembered. Easily. They're human beings. You remember something happening. How many times have you remembered an incident and ended up remembering it incorrectly? So for tawatur. For ahad, you don't need that, yeah.
So hadith mutawatir is a hadith sahih.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's the highest. It's the highest level. It's the صنو القرآن في الثبوت. So it's قطعي الثبوت, as we call it, meaning with certainty of authenticity. And that's for the Quran, and then متواتر من حديث رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام, which is very few things. But tawatur is not just tawatur lafzi, the wording. Really what's important is tawatur ma'nawi, in meaning. And this is actually where tawatur becomes important. And this is where most people don't understand what this is altogether. You can read this at home, inshallah. But tawatur ma'nawi, for example, the fact that we pray Asr 4 rak'at, that's tawatur ma'nawi. That's something that everyone's been doing for a very long time. They watched it, they do it. We only have maybe one or two hadith where he said it's 4. Only one or two, and they're both ahad. But it's tawatur ma'nawi, meaning thousands of Sahaba did it, and thousands of tabi'een have been doing it, and it's been going on for a very, very long time. You can trace back the tawatur of this action. So it's a tawatur, it's a figurative tawatur, it's a succession of behaviors, really not of specific wordings. For example, I'll give you an example. The hadith of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ is ahad in its nature. Now some scholars will call it mutawatir, but it's a very weak argument, but that's fine. But it's ahad in general, it's ahad. But the concept of niyyah is not. The concept of niyyah is mutawatir, meaning the importance of niyyah, the significance of your intentions, that is not ahad. We have a lot of ahadith that talk about it from different angles, and we have Quran, and we have scholarly records that go back to the tabi'een, and to the Sahaba. So this is something that is mutawatir in terms of its significance. And that's what really you want to know about within Islam. What is mutawatir ma'na? What has come to us in succession in tawatur in terms of concepts that have been well established within our deen, so that we know to care for them. Maybe the actual wording of this one hadith about this concept is ahad, but the concept is not ahad, which is important, because if you misunderstand the two things, you can end up in problems. Yes, the hadith of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ is ahad, but the concept of niyyah is not. It's not dhanni thubut. The concept, the importance of intentions is not something that has a probabilistic authenticity. It has a certain authenticity, because of how many records that we have regarding it. So that's what this means. So you can read this a little bit when you want and kind of educate yourself, but it's important to understand the difference between the two. The bulk of work by usuliyin and by fuqaha, when they talk about tawatur, is here. And this is what has to actually be hold on to. And a lot of people who don't understand this end up saying crazy stuff like, how do we know that we should pray this prayer? How do we know? What do you mean, how do you know? You think, alayhi salatu wasalam, he passed away, the masjid was packed every salah. What do you think they did? They forgot when they did exactly what he did. Then they went to the others and they did the exact same thing, established it the same way. It's known. It's very simple, like how he behaved, alayhi salam, how he established these things does not require a hadith mutawatir. The tawatur that it has is actually much more powerful, because it's a tawatur of action. And it exists in a lot of examples. There's a lot of examples for it. All right, let's move on to the making good time, inshallah. Today we'll be done. So hadith number 16? Yes. Like I said, 17, 18 will be Sunday at 5, and then 19, 20, and 21 will be on next Wednesday, and we'll be finished, inshallah ta'ala. So, عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رجلا قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أوصني قال لا تغضب فردد مرارا قال لا تغضب رواه البخاري. So, this kind of adds to to what I was talking about. These two hadith come hand in hand quite nicely. A man said, "Awsini." Right? The hadith in Bukhari he said, "Awsini," meaning give me advice. Wasiyya is advice, and it's also like your last advice, really. يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية للوالدين. So the wasiyah means a very powerful recommendation or command. And from a human being, it means your last advice. Wasini, meaning I won't see you again. That's why people say it before they travel. Because the concept is I may not see you after this. I may die on my travel, or I come back and find you dead. So wasini, we use that term, that's why it's used that way. So awsini, the man is saying this to the Prophet ﷺ. We know by context of just using that word that this man is traveling. Like he's going away, and he doesn't know if he'll come back and find the Prophet ﷺ around, or whether he'll make it back to begin with. So he wants a final piece of advice, something that he can take with him, some piece of wisdom he can carry with him for the rest of his life, or something that will summarize everything that he needs to know. So he says, لا تغضب, don't be angry. Don't get angry. فردد مرانا, and you find other narrations of this hadith where he'll ask, Ya Rasulullah, awsini, say it again, can you, maybe a bit more? So he keeps on asking the Prophet ﷺ, he just keeps on telling him, لا تغضب, just don't get angry, لا تغضب, you'll be fine. So the man maybe, فكأنه تقال لها, as some of the narrators, meaning as if the man felt that this wasn't sufficient. Like it wasn't enough, he was hoping for a little bit more. And the Prophet ﷺ only told him, don't get angry. Now, of course, this hadith became an anthem. Again, another hadith that unfortunately we use just to brag, for bragging rights, but not for actual practice. Now, first of all, when we say anger is classified by the scholars of tazkiyah as one of the diseases of the heart. For sure, it's classified that way. But it's also an emotion in general. Like when you talk about anger, you define it, it's an emotion to a certain degree. Is it the Prophet ﷺ telling us not to have a specific emotion? Is that what he's trying to say, alayhi salatu? It's not really what he would usually do, alayhi salatu. I mean, in the Quran and in the Sunnah, you almost never find a command of not having an emotion. And if you're being commanded not to have an emotion, then you just probably misunderstood what he was trying to say here, because he wasn't pointing to the emotional part of it. Because you can't really control your emotions. Your control of your emotions is zero. You have no control over your emotions. Your emotions are your emotions. You feel the way you feel. And you can never be held accountable for how you feel. And that's an Islamic law. Like, you're not held accountable for how you feel. You feel something, you feel it. That's how you felt. Right? It's what you do about that is what you're going to be asked about. It's how you let that feeling fester and stick around. Because your feelings are actually something that you do have indirect control over. You don't have direct control over. I mean, there's a big differentiation here. And I shared this with you when I showed you that funny looking, very lame drawing that I shared with you a while back. Where is it? What was this back? Oh my gosh. Yeah, so this one over here. All right, so this kind of weird thing that I showed you here. So what I usually add to this diagram, just for information, is here, thoughts. How much do you directly control? Between 60 and 80%, depending on how old you are, and depending whether you have any psychiatric problems. Like someone with OCD, for example, will have less control over their thoughts because they can't. So it's more of a challenge for them. Actions, you have control over 100% of your actions. If you don't, then we're in bigger trouble than I even understand. And I'm the most pessimistic person on the planet. And if you don't control your actions, then musibah. Feelings, you have zero direct control over. You control none of your feelings directly. However, you control them indirectly through this little system here. Because what you think goes into your heart. What you do in terms of what you see and what you hear, where you expose yourself, what you expose yourself to in terms of what's being said, what's being done, those are your actions. If there you're going to hear and see certain things, and you walk right in, then that's your action, and you expose yourself to hearing and seeing certain things. That goes into your heart, and then your heart, your subconsciousness, it puts forward your feelings. Right? So you do have control of your feelings. It's just not as quick as you would like it to be. It's a mixing pot that takes sometimes months or years to change. Like if the input has been really bad for a long time, the piping of the heart can be long. So it'll take a while for all of that to flush out. So you can't start putting good stuff into the heart and expect within the day that that's all going to change. It'll take a long time. The mixing is going to go on for a couple of months, and then you have to kind of filter all this garbage through and deal with all of that. And then maybe you'll start feeling some change in the... Not everyone's like that. Some people are quicker than others, but this is the general concept that I'm trying to explain to you. So you do have control, but maybe not as direct as you think. So when he says, "La taghdab alayhi salatu wasalam," the question is he talking about the feeling itself? Well, you could say yes if you understand all of this, or you can just say no, he's not talking about that. He's talking about the behavior, the results of it. He's talking about what actually happens. So we'll stop, inshallah, just for Salat al-Isha, and we'll continue, inshallah, right after. Jazakumullah khair. الله أكبر الله أكبر، أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله، أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله، حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح، قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة، الله أكبر الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. الله سبحانك الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
سنة من قد أرسلنا من قد أرسلنا قبلك من رسلنا ولا تجد لسنتنا تحويلا أقم الصلاة لدلوك الشمس إلى غسق الليل وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا ومن الليل فتهجد به نافلة لك عسى أن يبعثك ربك مقاما محمودا وقل رب أدخلني مدخل صدق وأخرجني مخرج صدق واجعل لي من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا وقل جاء الحق وزهق الباطل إن الباطل كان زهوقا وننزل من القرآن ما هو شفاء ورحمة للمؤمنين ولا يزيد الظالمين إلا خسارا وإذا أنعمنا على الإنسان أعرض ونأى بجانبه وإذا مسه الشر كان يئوسا قل كل يعمل على شاكلته فربكم أعلم بمن هو أهدى سبيلا ويسألونك عن الروح قل الروح من أمر ربي وما أوتيتم من العلم إلا قليلا ولئن شئنا لنذهبن بالذي أوحينا إليك ثم لا تجد لك به علينا وكيلا إلا رحمة من ربك إن فضله كان عليك كبيرا. الله أكبر.
الله.
سمع الله لمن حمده.
ربنا لك الحمد طيبا مباركا من السماء.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
آمين.
قل لئن اجتمعت الإنس والجن على أن يأتوا بمثل هذا القرآن يأتون بمثله ولو كان بعضهم لبعض ظهيرا ولقد صرفنا للناس في هذا القرآن من كل مثل فأبى أكثر الناس إلا كفورا وقالوا لن نؤمن لك حتى تفجر لنا من الأرض ينبوعا أو تكون لك جنة من نخيل وعنب فتفجر الأنهار خلالها تفجيرا أو تسقط السماء كما زعمت علينا كسفا أو تأتي بالله والملائكة قبيلا أو يكون لك بيت من زخرف أو ترقى في السماء ولن نؤمن لرقيك حتى تنزل علينا كتابا نقرأه قل سبحان ربي هل كنت إلا بشرا رسولا وما منع الناس أن يؤمنوا إذ جاءهم الهدى إلا أن قالوا أبعث الله بشرا رسولا قل لو كان في الأرض ملائكة يمشون مطمئنين لنزلنا عليهم من السماء ملكا رسولا قل كفى بالله شهيدا بيني وبينكم إنه كان بعباده خبيرا بصيرا الله أكبر
الله
سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
الله
الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر
الله أكبر بسم الله الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم
الله أكبر
الله أكبر
سمع الله لمن حمده
ربنا لك الحمد حمدا كثيرا
اللهم يا من هو لطيف بعباده الطف بعبادك المسلمين في كل مكان
آمين.
اللهم الطف بعبادك المسلمين في غزة
آمين.
اللهم استر عوراتهم
آمين.
وآمن روعاتهم
آمين.
اللهم استر عوراتهم
آمين.
وآمن روعاتهم
آمين.
اللهم استر عوراتهم
آمين.
وآمن روعاتهم
آمين.
اللهم إنهم مظلومون فانتصر لهم
آمين.
وخائفون فأمنهم
آمين.
وجاء وجائعون فأطعمهم وحفاة فاحملهم وعراة فاكسهم اللهم ربنا لا يضامون وأنت رجاؤهم اللهم إنا نبتهل إليك بأنك أنت الله العزيز الرحيم أن تتدارك أمة نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم يا ربنا تدارك أمة نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم يا ربنا تدارك أمة نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم الله أكبر
الله
الله أكبر
الله
الله أكبر
الله
الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله استغفر الله استغفر الله استغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم إياك نستعين والصلاة والسلام الله سبحان ربنا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصراط المستقيم صراط بسم الله بسم الله ونعم يا ربنا ولك الحمد كثير الله سبحان ربنا يغفر لي ربي سبحان ربنا كما صليت على السلام السلام عليكم استغفر الله استغفر الله استغفر طيب بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. All right. So what we've established within this hadith, or what he's meaning, alayhi salatu wasalam, is more the action itself, or the consequences really in this case of the action. When he says, لا تغضب, don't get angry. Because if he was talking about the emotion, alayhi salatu wasalam, first of all, that would be a problem, because he's implying that we have direct control over it when we don't. And if he's talking about it from an indirect perspective, then the way that he's using the terminology here is a little bit odd for that, but it could be. But really what he's looking for, alayhi salatu wasalam, is for you not to behave or to act based on your anger. That's what he's pointing out here, alayhi salatu wasalam, is that when you're angry, don't act based on this emotion that you have, even though anger in many situations is important. For example, what's occurring to people overseas, or what's happening to the Muslims in Gaza and other parts of the world, it's something that should cause some degree of anger. But if you allow that anger to dictate what you're going to do emotionally, if you allow it emotionally to dictate your actions, then we get in trouble. That's when someone goes and does something violent, or something that lacks sanity, or lacks clarity, or lacks wisdom. And then we all pay for it as Muslims, and it makes this situation worse. The same thing goes for when you're making a financial decision, or an academic decision, or a social decision, or honestly any choice at all. You don't make it when you're angry. Even when you're raising your kids, when you discipline your kid, you don't discipline your kid when you're angry. They know that you're just doing it when they know that you're angry, and that this is more of a way for you to get rid of that extra anger and to remove your, to satisfy that need for you to not be angry, or for you to take out that aggression upon them. They know that. So if you want to actually discipline them and you want them to learn, then you have to do it when you're not angry. So basically any behavior that you do, anything that you do, when you're in the midst of that anger, you're going to regret later. Which is what he's trying to teach here, alayhi salatu wasalam. That you have to learn to actually control it. وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ, right? The ability to control that anger and not allow it to make you do something you wouldn't do. It doesn't mean that anger shouldn't have existed there. That's for analysis. That's for something you to think about. That's something for you to think about later. Whether that anger should have been there or should have not been there. There's no cookie cutter answer for this question. Meaning sometimes anger is appropriate and sometimes it is not. And that's really what needs to be established, because what you get angry about reflects the values that you carry. But what angers you really reflects who you are and what value. Again, this emotion that we're looking at, that's coming out. This feeling is what's driving it is the set of values that you have put in place. It takes a while to set them up, but then they will lead to anger. In addition, maybe to other issues that we can carry. For example, people who are oppressed or persecuted or mistreated or humiliated with no closure will have anger. Right? They'll have anger because they carry that anger towards the persecutor or the oppressor or the person who humiliated them. And because they weren't able to get back what is their rights, they weren't able to achieve justice, then they carry this anger around with them. And this anger that they carry now around with them will present itself in different situations. It will cause them to affiliate things, meaning any situation that they're in that is somehow similar, even on an atomic level sometimes, to a situation where they were persecuted, oppressed, or mistreated, or humiliated, will cause them to bring out the anger if they feel they had the ability to do so. And sometimes that anger, if not most of the time, is actually not towards the oppressor or the persecutor or the person who mistreated them. The anger they have is towards themselves for not responding the way they thought they should have responded at that time. Meaning when they were faced with something and they failed to rise to the occasion, or failed to respond the way that they thought they should have responded, then they carry all of this anger towards themselves. So when they're in a situation that may be similar, it ends up coming out. It's not anger towards the other person when it comes out towards their spouses or their children or their friends or at work. It's really not. It's an anger that they have towards themselves. It's a feeling of shame that's actually fueling this really in its background. Now, all of this can be talked about. There's a lot of others. Anger is not that simple. It's a disease of the heart that's actually quite complex and requires a lot of breaking down. But what he teaches us, alayhi salatu wasalam, in 2 words, very simplistically, very simply, is just don't make decisions when you're in that state. If you're in that state, don't do anything. Don't say anything. Don't make a decision. Don't behave in any way. Wait until you're able to overcome that, and then do whatever you think is correct. And that is obviously the most valuable piece of advice in all of this, because he is alayhi salatu wasalam making sure that you have some system to deal with. You have an algorithm when you're in the midst of anger. You know what to do next. I'm not going to make a decision. But then your job is to go back and figure out, why did I get angry to begin with? Why did this bother me? Is this actually worth bothering me? Like, is this what happened, this incident, is it worth me getting angry over it? And you're going to find out there's a lot of things that anger you or shouldn't anger you. But they do. But then you have to go and do a little bit of soul searching and figure out, why is it that this is angering me? What is the reason that I can't seem to tolerate this event or this behavior or this word or this person or whatever it is that I can't seem to tolerate? You have to go back and ask that question, and you'll find that there's a lot of the onion layers start to come off, and you start to, okay, there's a lot here that's causing it. Now, that is something that either you will do in your life or you don't. And that's what tazkiyah is about. Tazkiyah in its essence, the ihsan. Remember we talked about the hadith of Islam, iman, ihsan. That third pillar of what Islam is all built upon is you learning why and what causes you to do things, so that you can understand yourself better, so you understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better, so you understand the relationship you have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better. And without that, then we end up struggling with the superficial relationship that we have and the superficial connection we have with the deen, which is why that initial hadith that we were talking about today becomes a token one, because it's just something that you say. But you're still going to, every time it puts you in the wrong position, you'll say something wrong. Now, no one's perfect, you'll make mistakes, but if there's a recurrence or there's a pattern here, then that's what really, we're trying to kind of tease out here for ourselves. So he says, La taghdab alayhi salatu wasalam. He's offering an amazing piece of advice here. Don't do anything when you're angry, when your emotions are getting the best of you for some reason. Sometimes those emotions are appropriate. Sometimes you're angry because something actually is worth making you angry, because it was the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam fil hadithi and the Imam al-Tirmidhi. This is what he said alayhi salatu wasalam. Or this is what it said. This is how he's described. Forgive me. This is how he's described. قال ولا يغضب لنفسه ولا يغضب لنفسه. He never got upset for himself. فإذا تعدي الحق لم يقم لغضبه شيء حتى ينتصر له. But if someone was to perform an injustice or an act of oppression, or if righteousness or haqq was being violated, then his anger, nothing would stop it until he was able to stand up for that. Alayhi salatu wasalam. But when it was for himself, you couldn't offend him. Like, you could offend him, but you couldn't provoke. The known hadith in connection with Imam Nasa'i, and it also has a taraf in al-Bukhari as well, where there's a man from a Jewish man from a different faith who accepted Islam obviously that day. But the story was that he came to the Prophet ﷺ after he had taken the Prophet ﷺ had taken a dain from him. Like, he had lent the Prophet ﷺ something for a year. So he came and he started yelling at him and saying, "Anta zalim wa anta kadha," and you didn't give it back. And he's saying very, very rude words. Until Umar al-Khattab was ready to chop his head off. And the Prophet ﷺ calmed Sayyidina al-Khattab and told him, هَلَّا أَمَرْتَهُ بِحُسْنِ الطَّلَبِ وَأَمَرْتَنِي بِحُسْنِ الْأَدَاءِ. Wouldn't it be better if you just told him to ask nicely and told me to maybe to pay him on time, even though it was a year? And the Prophet ﷺ was saying, قُلْ نَعَمْ, we said a year. Why are you yelling? فالرجل, after a few moments of after this happening and he continuing, he concluded by saying, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأنك عبده ورسوله. فقال عمر ما دفعك? Why did you do this? فقال عندنا أنه حليم كلما أسأت إليه كلما ازداد حلما. He is someone who is very patient. The more abusive and aggressive you become, the more patient he becomes, alayhi salatu wasalam. Because, and that obviously, see, saying that I'm going to do that, go ahead. Say it if you want. It's going to take you nowhere. You're not. You can say it. I'm going to do that. I'm going to be like that. Yeah, you're not. You're not. If you don't actually go back and figure out exactly what it is that angers you, why you get angry, what the source of it, whether you go to the root and figure out where the flaws exist within your value system, within your principles that are causing you to be angry about stuff that aren't worth being angry about, then this will not change. But what you can do is what he explained here, alayhi salatu wasalam, is just when you do get angry, don't do anything. Just don't make a decision. Don't say anything. Close your mouth. For wives, may I offer you this piece of wisdom. Right. No. Men, when they be quiet, the ones who do, the ones who clam up, that's usually why they're clamming up. Like, if you're married to a guy and at some point Yani you're discussing and he just clams up. That's it. He stops speaking altogether. And no matter what you do, and you're like, you have no feeling. No, he has feelings. He's a human. He has emotions. But sometimes he clams up because he feels like he has nothing good to say anymore. Like all that's going to come out of his mouth, all he can think of, that when the evil piece kicks in, and all I can think of are just perfectly written evil sentences that will just hit right a bullseye and ruin that person's day, if not week. When that's all that's running in, the person should close their mouth and sit quietly. So sometimes when men clam up, it's because that's why, because they don't want to say something. Not all the time. It's just a piece of. It seems to come up quite a bit within relationships. This problem of men not speaking. Yeah, in arguments sometimes if you run into that moment, and it goes back to this piece here, right? It goes back to فَلْيَقُلْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَصْمُتْ. Say something good or hold your tongue. So sometimes that's one of the reasons that people actually climb up in relationships. It's not just men. Maybe women do it too. I don't know. My experience has not been, but maybe women do it too in some other parallel universe that I'm not acquainted to. But if they do and they don't, and they're able not to, but most of the time it's And honestly, it's not always a bad thing. People get whatever they have in their chest off, and in relationships it should be a safe place to do it. It should be a safe place to do it. But it happens quite a bit where people just hold back because they feel that now there's nothing good that's going to come out of their mouth, so they prefer not to say anything at a given moment, which is not a bad thing. But la taghdab, in order for it to work, you start with that by not saying or doing anything when you're angry. For example, men that allow their anger to push them to the point where they say the word talaq. That's a problem. That means are you not learning from him alayhi salatu the basic, which is don't say anything when you're angry. But you haven't even spent time to figure out why do you get so angry to the point where this is the thing that comes out of your mouth and you're ruining your family. Like it took you so much time to build this family. How many years did you have to put into building this family? You're going to ruin it with a moment of anger. That means you don't have control and you have no self-awareness and you have no self-accountability and you should not have the isma. Like the man should not have the ability to control this contract anymore. It should be given to the person who has more mental stability to actually control this contract and hold their tongue when they feel that they're getting upset. And obviously, we're beyond that. Abuse comes from anger. Where does abuse come from? Very, very few people who are chill and happy are abusing other people. Very few. Maybe a couple of psychopaths out there who do this. But they're probably holding on to a lot of anger that's just not, that is so complex that the way it surfaces is not through the emotional response that you're seeing, but it's still there. This is why they talk about people who get mistreated when they're young or abused or molested, or they end up having problems when they're older because there's so much anger that the system just shuts down. The system just does a shutdown because there's too much anger. The emotion is of a level that the system can't carry it, so you have to turn it off altogether. It doesn't mean it's not there anymore. It's going to be channeled in a completely different way. It's very dangerous. Like the concept of anger is very problematic in understanding what it is. It's a fire that will eat you up on the inside and it will cause so much pain to everyone around you. The Prophet ﷺ gave this piece of advice, miraran. Miraran. You keep on asking, give me, we'll see you. Just don't let your anger get the best of you. Just don't let your anger get the best of you. And the guy, taqal, he felt like it was a simple piece of advice. And that's how he lived his life, alayhi salatu wasalam, trying to explain to people something and they just don't, not everyone got it. Not everyone's understood. No, you have no idea how well this will serve you in your life. If you just learn to not do anything when you're upset, when something upsets you or angers you. And then actually go back and look at why. Yeah. Go ahead.
So a couple of things. Did he particularly say this to this person because this person needed to hear that?
Could be. We don't know. I mean, we don't have the context. Nowhere in the hadith that are narrated do we have a context of this man being known to be an angry person. It could be. I mean, the context that could be the case there, but we just don't have that to be.
And this whole idea, I'm just the first part that you spoke about.
Yeah.
It makes sense that it's something else triggered you.
Yeah.
It's something small may happen, but as mothers, your child, you teach them over and over and over, and then they do. They teach the behavior. At one point, you're going to lose it, and the anger will come.
Sure.
At that moment, I would think that it's because of this repeated action, as opposed to something else.
No, it's not. Yeah, very rarely is it. Very, very rarely is it actually. It's more of. It's actually more of an issue of control. If you want to like break this down simplistically, and it really, it's more of control. I said no, and you did it anyways. I mean, you're threatening my authority and my control. And this is my kingdom, and if I don't have control over it, then I don't know what I have. And if I don't have this, then I have nothing, and it just cascades into this big musibah, so you get angry. So really,